Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for 27th of November 2013. I'm Steve Withers, and joining me this week is a slightly slimmed down panel with games editor Mark Botwright.
Haggis? What is haggis?
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
When only a few of us are left, we will feel an irresistible pull towards a faraway land to fight for the prize.
Right, let's get straight onto it, lads. Hardware news, and I've written this down as L Gate. Originally I wrote LG Gate, thought I'd be clever and say L Gate. Basically, it's cock-up gate. News broke last week, and it turned out that on LG TVs, now they monitor your viewing habits, which isn't unusual. Most TVs can do that, and often it's very useful because it means they can monitor what you're watching and then recommend things for you to watch you might like. There is a option in the menu on their TVs to opt out of this if you don't want your information being sent back to LG for research purposes. Now, unfortunately, as it turns out, the TVs were still sending the information back even if you had opted out. Now, LG have come on after the story broke and said, look, sorry, that was a mistake. It was an accident. It shouldn't have happened. Our point of view, I think, and certainly in Mark's story, you made a valid point, which is that surely it should be that you don't opt in, or rather, sorry, you don't opt out, but you should be allowed to opt in. And secondly, obviously, if you do opt out, it shouldn't be doing it. It's been a slightly embarrassing week for LG, really, guys, isn't it?
It's awkward, but I'm afraid as a jaded, cynical, and I don't know, perhaps someone who probably doesn't care about this as much as he should. If you don't want these things to send any of your data along, be it a smart TV, be it a games console, be it some other device that is a data gatherer, don't connect it to the means of transmitting that information, because I'm afraid I don't have any confidence that, having made this very public apology and correction, that actually it isn't still garnering information in some way, shape or form. My television downstairs isn't an LG, I've got a Panasonic, but I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that although I dare say the amount of data it's actually able to send back is very limited, because the only actual thing on the television I use is Netflix, I have no doubt that it is, as well as Netflix, is busy harvesting that data to work out what it is I'm doing and whether I'm actually a sane human being or just something that enjoys watching 80s reruns. And that I accept that as coming with the territory. Maybe that makes me a bad person, I don't know.
But isn't there a difference? Well, I was just going to say there's kind of assuming that it comes with the territory, and then there seems to be different levels of how much this data is being used. It's the difference between someone stopping you in the street and asking you, about a blind taste test or something, and then someone ringing you up and saying they're going to use all your answers to sell to third-party companies and the like. I think with this kind of thing, the trouble with the idea of saying, well, you should have to opt in, it'll just get hidden in a license agreement, which is, automatically it'll be there, and then you'll be back to the same stage, which is, where's the opt out?
True. I mean, I'll give LG the benefit of the doubt here, as say that it was an accident. But I think what worried people was that it wasn't just monitoring your viewing habits in terms of what you were watching on, say, Netflix or on the TV itself. If you attached any kind of USB device to it, it was also going through all of that and reporting it back. Which a bit like Ed, my view is that everyone's doing this to me all the time. Amazon, God knows how much about me Apple knows, but I guess when it's shown to you in sort of harsh black and white terms, you suddenly realise just how little privacy we actually have left in the modern world.
Every now and again, Amazon actually scares me. Because every now and again, I don't know if anyone else gets this, but every now and again, there'll be all the kind of things which I've browsed for before. Like there was a bunch of pens recently, and all of a sudden up popped this Jenga game, which I'd seen in a supermarket only the day before, and I picked up, and I'm just thinking, but I haven't searched for that online. I know I haven't. And, suddenly you do start to get a little bit paranoid.
I think Amazon know me better than my parents do, frankly. They seem to know they recommend things to me with unerring accuracy. But you're right. Sometimes they come up with stuff I think, I don't even remember looking for that. That's clever. Sometimes it's quite handy when something I didn't know was available is recommended to me. But sometimes you do feel like Big Brother is watching me, and Big Brother's a large retailer now.
Yeah, but Christmas is brilliant for screwing with the Amazon predictor system, because obviously it kind of had me down pat. So, I've been buying records. Every now and again, I still have to buy a CD, and I buy camera things. And then today, I've bought an electronic fluffy dog that reads children's stories, and I have absolutely no idea what the computer's going to make with this information now. It's like, because you looked at a Canon prime lens and this animated dog, we've decided that you're mental and we're going to leave you well alone. It's brilliant, and I haven't even really started on Christmas shopping yet, so I've got to buy all sorts of stuff that otherwise I wouldn't go anywhere near. And I'm sure it can make allowances for Christmas and say, actually, that's a deviation, a one-off from the norm, and so on and so forth. But I don't know about you guys, but after I've done a season, so to speak, all the way through spring, you'll get recommendations. You think, yeah, I'll have a look at that. Or it's like, we noticed that you bought X, so here's a look at something that you're never ever going to have a look at ever again. Or because I spend my go on.
Thanks to you, I've recently been recommended a lot of coats.
Well, what can I say? You might need a coat, Steve. And perhaps Amazon's just looking at
always have a good coat. Yeah, that's true.
The parlous state of your own wardrobe.
Yeah, it was a bit threadbare, I have to say.
Well, there you go. You just need a nice. Actually, no, you don't want an identical leather pea coat, because that would just be weird. If we have to go around the Bristol show wearing the same coat, that would just be odd. But you need a nice coat. Full stop.
Okay, so that's us all being spied on by every manufacturer and retailer we can think of. I guess it's just part of the modern world. Good news, though, I think, my perspective at least, and I'm sure some of you guys, and certainly enthusiasts, will agree with this. Another story that broke last week was that a manufacturer's promising a process that can manufacture cheaper OLED TVs. Now, this is great news if it's actually true, and if they actually can increase the yields on these things and also produce them for less money, because clearly one of the big problems with OLEDs had over the last couple of years, and the reason why its launch was delayed so much, is because they are a bugger to make, and obviously being difficult to make makes them very expensive. Given that after a brief time with them, I can see the potential in terms of picture quality. What you really want now is them to be cheaper, so that our golden future of 4K OLED can come a lot sooner than it currently looks like it will be.
Well, anything that gets the price of what is, let's face it, the great white hope for picture quality for enthusiasts down is good. I have to say, I've been out with relatives for most of today, so I haven't done quite the research I wanted on this. Did it clarify, Steve, whether this was getting the price of OLED panels in general down, or 1080p OLED, or is it just hopefully the whole shebang, including the 4K OLED that we all want to see and own?
It didn't mention actual resolution. I'm assuming that the process is the process, and whether you've got more it's a bit like the current crop of 4K TVs. They are basically LCD televisions, so I'm guessing that if you're making an LCD panel, but be it 1080p or 4K, the process is essentially the same. You just got more pixels. That's not the case, by the way, with plasma. One of the reasons why we're not going to see any 4K plasmas is because it's physically very difficult to fit them onto that tiny little space. You basically have to make very, very large screens, and it gets ridiculously expensive. But assuming that the process is essentially the same, but they're just more pixels, there's no reason why, if their process works and it is cheaper, that they couldn't also apply that to 4K at some point. Now, don't forget that Panasonic have been talking about their printing process, which apparently is a lot cheaper and a lot more reliable than the current processes being used. So there's a possibility that they might also have a method for delivering greater yields and cheaper OLED panels, and that would be 4K. So there is at least potential to see the prices drop relatively quickly. And if they can, reduce the cost of production, then given what we've seen with the 4K panels, which is the prices have just plummeted on those in the last. I reviewed a 84-inch LG at this time last year. That was £23,000. I've currently got, and I'll talk about it in a minute, the 84-inch Toshiba, which is the same panel basically, and that's now £11,000. So it's still a lot of money, but that's considerably less than it was a year ago. So if we can see that kind of precipitous drop in prices for OLEDs once production gets up and running and are more reliable in terms of yield productions, then that could be good news all around.
Not going to argue with that. As I say, anything that helps me not have to own an LCD television as my main screen is to be saluted and applauded. So come on, chaps.
Here, sir. Here.
Make it work.
Yeah, no, I just echo those sentiments. Cheaper is better, obviously, and I think take up of 4K. as it gets cheaper, as it's easier to manufacture, and you see hopefully a little bit of a recovery in the economy, maybe the next 5 to 10 years might be a bit rosier. Maybe it might take off at a quicker pace than some have projected.
I know it's been a difficult post 2008. It has been difficult, both in terms of the economy and in terms of the consumer electronics industry generally. But I definitely think in the last year things seem to be picking up a bit. I've seen, I think more money being spent by on the PR and marketing side, slightly more expensive sort of press events being arranged. It looks as if there's a certain amount of, I'm not saying it's booming again, but it looks like maybe things are on the way back after the dark times post the credit crunch in 2008. So yeah, hopefully, let's be honest, they desperately need OLED to do well. They need 4K to do well. They need to sell more TVs in what is already a saturated market, and obviously 3D was a total bust. So they desperately need this to work, and I obviously want it to, partly because if there's no manufacturers, there's not much for us to do either. So let's hope, fingers crossed, it does work, and they can produce OLEDs cheaper.
It'll be interesting to see what CES does. I think CES will be the weather vane for confidence in general, and we'll see how it goes. Obviously, you'll be out there on the ground.
Will.
I'll be monitoring it from a more hi-fi perspective, where I have to say I echo your sentiments. I'm seeing products being released that have a certain boldness to them in terms of their pricing, in terms of their pitching, in terms of their positioning that we possibly haven't seen for a couple of years. So yeah, let's hope that is the case, and that OLED on the video side, whatever 4K transmission system we elect to use for actually viewing things on it, and from my perspective, hopefully just a bit more in the way of high-res audio and things like that, it starts to make some progress after what have been some very, very sort of dead years.
And I mentioned it a minute ago, but currently have the Toshiba 84-inch UHD ultra high definition television in for review. It's ludicrously big. We just managed to get it into the cottage when it arrived. It weighs a ton, and there was definitely a point at which you think, wouldn't it be cheaper just to buy a projector? Because it's 84 inches and 11,000 quid, and I've also currently got Sony's 4K projector, the VW500, which is only £8,500, and that starts to look quite cheap compared to £11,000. And obviously, you can go even bigger than 84 inches if you want to. So I've always slightly struggled to understand the logic behind buying a massive screen, really expensive television, when I think you can just get more bang for your buck, and in all honesty, a better image from a projector.
Different market.
True.
Totally different.
Daytime viewing.
Well, yeah, it's more the case that this is a fit and forget solution for someone for whom AV is an interest, but not a primary interest, potentially not even a sustained interest. It's a fit and forget solution, and it means everyone else in the household can do it. As Mark says, it doesn't need any care, thought, attention, or planning to make it happen, and it's just as happy watching pointless at 5:30 in the afternoon when one of the children is doing it, as it is actually sitting down for a proper movie and letting it roll. And I think actually firmly there's a place in the market for both of these solutions. Whilst you're in an unusual position to be able to compare them, I imagine that the people that actually do compare them can be counted on the fingers of one knee.
Yeah, that's a very good point, to be honest, Ed. And I think, but watching the TV, my view, I know we've mentioned this before on a number of occasions, and it is a very valid point. It needs to be, I think, constantly people need to be reminded of, which is that the current crop of 4K televisions are, aside from their high resolution, in essence, just LCD televisions. This is an 84-inch edge-lit LED LCD TV, and therefore all the problems that come with edge-lit LED LCD TVs are inherent in this television. In fact, if anything, they're magnified, because obviously you're trying to spread the backlight across an 84 inches is a gigantic screen area, absolutely gigantic, and it is very difficult. Although, in all fairness, actually, the backlight is relatively uniform, surprisingly, considering the sheer size of the screen. But things like in local dimming and that sort of stuff, you are getting a lot more haloing, and it is a lot more obvious on a screen that big. And any problems with the image, the source material, or any issues with the scaling are obviously magnified as well, just because of the sheer size of the television and size of the screen. But given the massive difference in price between this and the LG from last year, and they are the same panel, that is an impressive drop from 23,000 to just 11,000. And I know if you go down to the smaller screen sizes, I think the 58-inch Toshiba, that's going for about $2,500, which is and the 65-inch is 4,300, I think. So those are the sort of prices where you could really, that's directly competing with large screen 1080p televisions. So it is amazing how quickly prices have dropped with 4K TVs.
Which actually in many ways is quite positive, because it does give OLED a reason to exist, in so much as if manufacturers want to sell a television which they actually have some chance of making any bloody money on, they are going to have to look somewhere other than LCD to make it happen. Yeah,
it's true. It's very true. I've got a slight bone to pick with Toshiba. They sent me the wrong bloody remote control for the television, because I sat down last night to watch Doctor Who. I thought, great, I can watch it in 3D. And it being a 4K panel with passive 3D, the 3Ds should be excellent, because you've got a full 1080p image for each eye. There's absolutely no crosstalk, etc. I thought, brilliant, I can watch Doctor Who in 3D on this massive screen. And they sent me, I couldn't get the remote control didn't have the 3D button on it, so I couldn't actually activate and select side by side 3D.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the new Oxford English Dictionary definition of a first world problem right there. I don't think you could do any better than that. We may as well close the book on it. That is the most first world problem in the history of the
I was incensed last night, I'm telling you. I was absolutely livid, because I went into the menus and I just could not get it in any way. I mean, I could get it in the 3D menu, but it just would not let me access the right part of the menu. It was just grayed out, and I couldn't do anything to get it to work. And I was going in so good. Like, I'm all ready. I've got a cup of tea and some biscuits. I'm ready to watch Doctor Who. I was absolutely livid. The air was blue last night, so I had to basically record the 3D broadcast and watch it in 2D, which wasn't terrible. But watching it in 2D, I was thinking, there's loads of really cool stuff in there that's going to look great in 3D. Why can't I watch it in 3D? And annoyingly, I couldn't even just take the PVR into the home cinema and use the Sony, because Sony didn't send me any 3D glasses yet either for that. I'm beginning to think there's a conspiracy to kill 3D, because it's just like frustrating when you can't actually watch something in 3D when you really want to.
And I'd just like to publicly thank the marketing teams for both of these august manufacturers for driving Steve into an apoplectic frenzy. That is the little things in life that make it worthwhile.
Yes, I thank you all.
It's the additional, I'd got my cup of tea and biscuits ready.
By
the time you found 3D, that's gone cold.
It was a latte.
Oh, dear.
With espresso machines. I made a nice latte, and I had a couple of Jaffa cakes. I was all ready to go. I'm assuming out of the three of us, I was the only one that watched it. Was I?
Yeah, I can't remember what I watched last night. I spent more time listening to records, because my son fell asleep downstairs, and I just went upstairs and listened to some music, and it was sublime. Literally Doctor Who. Meh. No, sorry. Music last night was awesome. Lovely.
Did you watch it?
I'll be honest, I didn't know it was on, I'm afraid.
That's actually an achievement. We've reached saturation level on.
There's been so much on. I tried watching a bit of the lecture with Brian Cox, and I got through a bit of that. That was quite interesting. But no, when was this on? You'll have to fill me in. This hasn't received enough publicity, Steve.
Seriously, this has got to be the most plugged TV program in the history of television. I think it was like broadcast simultaneously in 94 countries and in the cinema. It was almost impossible not to see it, but you two managed, so congratulations.
We found a way.
Anyway, I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was quite good. And it had some nice little cameos in it and stuff like that. And it was a well put together and well thought out way of celebrating 50 years whilst also continuing the story and doing a bit of retcon as well, which I thought was quite good. So yes, a success there on the part of the BBC, and hopefully it's coming out in a week on Monday on 3D Blu-ray, which I'll probably pick up actually. There are some excellent articles, particularly one written by Simon Crust on the site right now about all different doctors and who might be your favourite doctor. So worth reading if you are a Doctor Who fan or even just curious. It's actually a great piece that Simon's written. Right, that's it for hardware news. We'll be back in a minute with games news. Okay, Mark, games news. Let's be honest. There's only one thing happening right now, so take us through it. How's the Xbox One launch gone?
Last Friday, I think it's gone pretty well. All in all, it's a new piece of technology. I mean, they've come out and said that they've sold over 1 million day one, so equaling Sony's record with the PlayStation 4. Even though that is in, I think it's 22 countries as opposed to just the USA and Canada for the PS4. But lots of issues, lots of kind of problems, lots of venting. The first kind of big console launch, well, after PS4, in an age of social media and kind of instant consumer reaction. There's a standard things which obviously most people could have expected, which was that the servers would get absolutely hit because a day one update and, you know, 1 million people getting something, all of a sudden, you know, things are going to go awry and there'll be such a massive variety of variables. There's no way they could have, no testing would have been amply sufficient for that. You know, a bit like GTA Online, as soon as the servers get pummeled, people get a little bit testy. No two people really seem to have the same variety of problems, but there are kind of common threads. You've got basic hardware faults, which are, you know, some knocks that seem to indicate that things perhaps have been rushed into transit. They were, you know, rushing to keep up with demand. And we've got the standard, which are broken drives, that kind of thing, you know, nasty sounding, you know, grinding noises and the like, games that won't install, and problem of the E100 bricked console syndrome, which it means the update basically went awry, and so that's submit straight back to Microsoft to get fixed. Yeah, so pretty much standard what you'd expect from any kind of major hardware launch.
I'm assuming that most of those problems, aren't on a wide scale. They're just on a relatively small scale.
It's so impossible to tell with these things because I mean, to this day, I don't know if we've ever had any kind of firm corroborated number for, say, the Red Ring of Death with the Xbox 360. And so there's, you know, estimates out there as to what it's kind of at, you know, some people saying around 1%, but, you know, with a certain amount of the issues, you just think, well, once the console gets updated, then that's, you know, that's no longer actually a problem console. That could be, you know, network connection problems. That's not necessarily tying into those numbers. As far as actual hardware faults go, I know Steve on the games team had to return his because of a drive that I think that wasn't installing games. But yeah, if you consider that the amount that they've actually sent out, if you consider 1 million consoles, the amount of YouTube videos that there actually are up there, you'd imagine in this day and age of, you know, cameras on smartphones, there'd be a hell of a lot more if it was, you know, massively widespread, you know, kind of 5-10% or something like that, something ridiculous.
You don't hear from happy people. They're too busy actually using the console.
Well, that was the funny thing about, I mean, with the PlayStation 4 launch, which was you go on Amazon and there were no 2, 3, and 4 star reviews. There were a bunch of 5 stars and then a huge amount of 1 stars. And so it's almost impossible to actually try and gauge how many people are actually happy. I mean, you know, I've heard back from a couple from the games team who've actually had problems with it. Leon.
Well, I was going to ask, sorry, Mark, who has got on the games team, who's got an Xbox One so far, and what are their initial impressions?
Manny's got one, Steve's got one, Leon's got one, and I've finally caved and ordered one.
Great, it took you 2 days.
I almost lasted. I almost got there. But yeah, I was always going to cave. But no, the funny thing is that almost exactly mirrors what a lot of people are saying, which is I asked them all, you know, what their first impressions are, and I've heard back from Manny, I've heard back from Steve, both of whom had some kind of connection issues, and Steve had a hardware fault. I haven't heard back from Leon, and I know why, because he's playing the damn thing.
I've noticed, apparently for launch, they've added YouTube and Love Film to the Xbox One platform. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, there's lots of stuff that's been you know, kind of at the last minute put there. I don't think there's any iPlayer yet. Question marks as to whether that'll ever make it, if the BBC are going to stick by not allowing it to go behind a paywall. Yeah, I mean, so far, the more the more things they get up there, the better. And thus far, the rest of the games team seem to be pretty pleased with how the user interface is and how it's kind of tying together as a multimedia machine. I mean, Kinect actually seems to have some kind of a use, which is nice.
Oh, so it's not being universally slated then as being a complete waste of money, and we object to having to pay for it in the first place.
I think thus far the sentiment seems to be that it's kind of handy to have something extra there through which you can control the console. Whether that's actually worth the amount that it adds to the price is another thing, and whether it's worth it from a gaming perspective is up in the air. But I did hit back actually. Steve reckons that the smart glass functionality is pretty good for sending messages and things like that, and so that sounds like it might actually be very much responsive and might actually be integrated well.
And what about the games themselves? What's the general feedback on the games?
The games themselves are the one thing that no one's actually spoken about when we've chatted about it.
How very 21st century.
Well, it's lots of things. People pick up a controller and then start talking about the buttons being slightly different and that kind of thing, and feedback. And yeah, it is true. The last thing you're going to talk about is the games, because you've paid, I suppose, such a huge amount for it, and ultimately the gameplay experiences are going to be so similar to what you're actually playing on previous generation consoles anyway. There's not a great deal of I'm trying to think of any kind of major kind of gameplay changes in this generation where there's been a sudden kind of shift. No, I don't think there has been anything.
I do have to say that Xbox did score in terms of appealing to someone that wasn't intending to go anywhere near one of these for quite a while. Actually featuring Forza in one of the TV spots, it instantly elevated. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that whatever incarnation of Gran Turismo makes it to PS4 will be spellbinding, and I've owned all the other ones, so why break the habit of a lifetime? But nothing in the PS4 ads for the UK anyway had me going, God, I could really do with that in my life. Whereas watching that McLaren P1 in the Forza spot, I thought, do you know what? That looks pretty awesome.
No, and the ad campaign, they did knock that out of the park. They really did.
Yeah. I mean, but in so much as they've all, but I mean, obviously, it's weird how targeted it is, because I'm not specifically aware of some of the other ones that they've mentioned, but they've done a nice big spread, and they've picked off a lot of different categories that people are fearsomely loyal to, and I'm there looking at it and going, do you know what? We'll see how it goes. I mean, were it not for the fact that just for amusement, I have made yet another ridiculous purchase, more bullied into it by my wife this time. But no, there's no immediate danger of me buying one of these consoles. But Xbox would be in first place just because of that Forza spot.
No, it's funny. I've heard a lot of people say exactly the same thing about that particular advert, which is as the car overtakes, the McLaren overtakes, and then it kind of skids around to a halt and the door opens. It seemed to entice a lot of people who otherwise were kind of slightly on the fence.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Definitely for me.
An email from Amazon quite soon telling you all about it. I'm just
so long as they don't target me for
broadcast.
Yeah, for Jenga games I've picked up in a supermarket, then I'm absolutely fine with it.
Are you worried it's like Person of Interest and they've got all of the cameras in all of the world just following you around? There
were 17 pages of pens I looked through at the bottom, and one Jenga, and I've never looked for that before online. That's what scares me. I'm more worried that it's all a little bit more Truman Show, to be honest.
Yeah, we're just actors.
I can assure you that I am
not very good ones.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a ham in that regard. Sorry.
Right. So that's it for the Xbox. Now, one of the stories that Mark put up last week, which I found not exactly surprising, but certainly interesting from the point of view of the PS4, is apparently it's costing Sony $381 to make it, and they're selling it in the States for $399. Is it? Is that right, Mark?
Yeah.
So they're making $18 on every one they sell. That's not counting presumably the amount of money they have to share with the shops or retailers, and also distribution costs to get them there. So I'm guessing that basically means they're losing money on every single one of these they sell.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of standard model that Sony have always gone with, which is to take some kind of a hit. I mean, they took a massive hit on the PS3, but in general, they tend to take a small hit on their consoles, at the least. This IHS research firm said that basically covers parts and assembly costs. So it's all estimates, and you can quibble with it and say, well, how do you know how much they've brokered for mass buying of components and the like? But it sounds like a pretty reasonable estimate. And I think one of the things that struck me out of that more than anything was the question of the controller, how much that cost. $18 to build, and it's selling for kind of $50, $60. And if you consider that that's the kind of thing that often people will pick up with a console, an extra controller, well, you're probably making it back right there. That's before
that's always the way, isn't it? Peripherals. That's the peripheral stuff. It's the stuff where they make the money back and get the margin.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Xbox Ones, Microsoft is still going with things like the Play and Charge kit. Sony with their Vita still kind of, in fact, they stuck with proprietary memory in that. So yeah, I mean, Sony have always done that with handhelds, and so there are a variety of tricks to try and make back that money. So I don't think anyone's going to be, crying that Sony are going to be bankrupt or anything like that. But it's nice to see that it's, should we say, a pretty sound fiscal approach.
Okay, right. Well, that's it for games news. So we're back with tech news. Actually, this next tech news story could have gone under games news. I decided to put it under tech news to pad out tech news a little bit more than just one other story. But it's Logitech who've got basically what amounts to a controller that you attach to your iPhone to turn it into basically a console controller. Mark, what do you think about this?
Yes.
Would it be of interest to you?
I've got to say, no, not really. There have been a variety of these kind of things, and you can in fact link a controller to devices and the like. And generally, they've fallen flat in the same way that kind of dedicated Android gaming tablet devices and the like. They all kind of, they're all touted with this grand idea of trying to get across that divide between traditional gamers and people who just game on their phones, and to try and get that market, that the people who spend great money on games are the kind of core audience, and trying to get them to actually download huge amounts on phones and the like, and to try and, I don't know, build up some kind of market awareness there. I don't know what it is, but these devices, they never really work. I'm sorry. The whole point of mobile gaming is the fact that usually they've got stripped down controls, and so they're tailored for the whole point of that. The touch interface is part of the reason that a lot of people gravitate towards them. So now you're adding extra buttons, so you've in fact pared something down, and then you're adding something back to it. It just seems like a bit of a bizarre mix.
Yeah, it's very specialised, isn't it? I mean, let's face it. Looking at the photos, it pretty much doubles the size of the device. It's £90, and I could, I'm self-employed and I work in the technology industry. If you met me for a meeting and I was in a rush and you saw my phone and it had that on it, you'd think, oh, well, it's a bit zany. He might have it for review, so on and so forth. If you're in any way a serious working adult and they see you with that, especially if it's a company phone, you're in some explaining to do by that stage. I don't know if I was able to somehow blag one, I'm sure it would be delightful, but I don't.
You make a valid point, Ed. It makes the device twice as big, and therefore you're getting to the point where you might just go and get a Vita or something like that.
I was going to say, for £85, if you just add a bit more, and considering the size of it, just whack a Vita in your bag and you're playing on a little OLED screen, and you've got far better games there anyway.
Yeah.
But
it does give it a vaguely, I don't know, it's the pad gives it an ever so slightly Atari Lynx-esque vibe.
Yes. No, that's it, exactly.
And I have to say, I had a soft spot for that. As a left-hander, I felt that Atari's screen flip for us southpaws was a wonderful thing, but I don't know if this thing does that. So but I'm just looking at it and thinking that really looks like my old Lynx.
didn't Mark's article say that it may not be supporting the iPhone 5C?
Well, it's announced for the iPhone 5 and the iPod Touch 5th generation. It doesn't mention the iPhone C, so it may or may not support it. It does require iOS 7. I'd be surprised if it didn't support the 5C because, I mean, essentially it's the same size as the 5, isn't it?
I was going to say, if you're only tailoring it to those devices and, it's only iOS 7 and it's £85, sure, that's got to be a tiny market, hasn't it?
Yeah, I imagine you're probably right on that front. Although I do notice there is a Fast and Furious 6 game, which I will have to get for my iPhone.
Oh,
okay, well, that rounds up tech news. We're back with movie news. Right, can one of you ask the question, please?
Steve, what's at the cinema?
That wasn't the question, Ed. The question is, what's at the cinema? Steve.
I wanted to mix it up a bit. Do you really want
right,
to?
Fine. No, that's fine. You mix it up all you want, mate, because only three
just
of us.
Answer and say,
anyway.
I haven't seen anything.
No, I have. I went out on Thursday night. I saw The Hunger Games Catching Fire, which I have to say was excellent. Now, Hunger Games, which I can't believe was nearly 2 years ago now, was one of those sort of surprise films. I knew nothing about the books whatsoever, never even heard of them. Went to go and see the movie, totally, went in totally blind, didn't know about it at all. I thought it was really good. I mean, admittedly, you could argue about it's got elements of battle royale, etc. in it, but I just thought that as a story, it was interesting. I like the political, the backdrop of politics and totalitarian state. I thought that Jennifer Lawrence is a superb actress, and I thought she'd perform really well. That the actual Hunger Games tournament was well done. Had a great supporting cast of people like Elizabeth Banks and Woody Harrelson. And overall, it was one of those films that was vastly superior to what it should have been. It was much, much better than I could possibly imagine it would be. And unbelievably, Catching Fire is even better than The Hunger Games. They take it to a whole new level. It doesn't just repeat itself. It's not, I know obviously it's based on the original source novel, but they've managed to take The Hunger Games, and it starts off basically where the previous film ended, with them going on a victory tour after her and Peter had survived this previous tournament. And then it snowballs from there in terms of the political backdrop. The sense that her victory has given people hope, and the government itself obviously wants to eliminate her because they feel she's a threat, and therefore they manipulate another set of games. But this time the games involve victors from the previous Hunger Games, and so there is a Hunger Games, if you like, later in the film, but it's quite long. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and it takes a good hour and 20 minutes before we even get to the next Hunger Games, if you like. But at no point do you feel as if they're dragging it out. In fact, if anything, that they're expanding the universe. It's a bit like, it's very much like The Empire Strikes Back in some respects, because it's kind of, obviously it takes off after the first film. It doesn't exactly have an ending. It kind of ends in a way that where it's going to happen next, where it's going to go to, but it leaves a lot of characters' fates unknown to a certain degree. So in that sense, it is sort of a middle film of what would be a trilogy, but actually is going to be 4 films, because they're doing that usual trick now that Potter's made popular, of taking the last book and doing it into making it 2 movies in order to milk the cash cow as much as possible. And it is a cash cow. The previous
Can I just ask,
games,
on that subject of it being a trilogy, and they're like, did they film this all in one, or was it separate productions?
Oh no, it's been done separately. Yeah.
Being done separately. I mean,
because
I have to say, Jennifer Lawrence is second only to The Rock, one of the busiest people in Hollywood. She has a phenomenal work rate.
And she's also an extremely good actress, and her star's rising since The Hunger Games. Obviously, she's won the Oscar since then for Silver Linings Playbook. And the original film made, I think, over 400 million in the US and about 600 million worldwide. It was a pretty big hit, way bigger than Lionsgate thought it would be. The Hunger Games Catching Fire opened on Thursday worldwide, and as of today, it's already made 300 million worldwide. So it looks like that's going to eclipse the previous film and do very well for itself, which I think it deserves to. You see, it's intelligent filmmaking. I think Gary Ross said he didn't want to make the sequel because he didn't think it was a long enough production schedule to do it justice. Although I've got to say, I think that Francis Lawrence has done a fantastic job. He's taken the film to another level. Obviously, it's got a bigger budget because the first film was successful. Bigger budget. It's expanded the universe, if you like, or within the film itself. You get more of a flavour of the capital, more of a flavour of the politics and the background. They brought in some great new actors. They brought in. They brought in Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's excellent in it. Never feel like he's just sort of slumming it. All the actors in it, Stanley Tucci, Lenny Kravitz, Donald Sutherland, Woody Harrelson, they all bring their A game to the film, even though you might think they could just think, well, this is like pulpy, silly material, but no, they give it a degree of reality.
Did you say Lenny Kravitz?
Yes. Very good, isn't it? He plays. He's in the first one too. He plays the costume designer. He does the costumes for the sort of the public appearances of the characters, and he's great in it. I didn't actually recognise him in the first film. I thought he looked strangely familiar. He's a little chubby in the face these days, I've got to say. But anyway, yes, it's a great film. He manages. What the director does do quite well is make it. In the first film, Gary Ross, to try and get around the problem of having kids killing each other without getting a higher rating, he used a lot of shaky cam, so you couldn't really see what was going on, which I found a bit annoying. This one, Francis Lawrence does manage to shoot the action scenes without needing to resort to that, and sort of editing it in a way that you don't really see the blood or the gore or the actual moment of violence, but it still has an impact. And I think that's actually quite clever of him, because it means you can still get the darkness of the film without needing to jeopardize its rating. But yeah, no, it's really good. I think I'd give it a good 8 or 9 out of 10. I think it was a superb film. Great.
Just about asked for marks out of 10. You've, I mean, as I say, you've been all over the place. I mean, the counsellor or whatever it was last week, had you spitting fire, and now you're catching fire and loving this, and I don't know, and you still haven't seen the One Direction movie. I don't know. Yeah, that was the one we were all hanging in for, Steve. So
I thought everyone was waiting for the review of Theodore Rex.
That as well, but that's
we'll wait for that in 4K.
Right, so that's Catching Fire. If you're a fan of the previous film, ideally go and see the previous film. Watch it on Netflix. It's on Netflix before you go and see Catching Fire, because you really do need to have seen the first film. It does kind of follow on and with this one continuous story.
You could even read the book, if the fact.
You could read the book, but any adaptation that's done well, you don't have to word the source material, and generally films are very different things from books. So I found a lot of the Potter movies were really difficult to watch because they just followed the book so slavishly, and by far and away the best Potter film is the one that Alfonso Cuarón made, where he basically didn't follow the book slavishly and actually brought some imagination and wit and charm and cinematic ability to actually making a real film. And that's the one Potter film you could watch in isolation. It still stands up as a movie. But anyway, if you've seen The Hunger Games, definitely go and see Catching Fire. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you haven't seen The Hunger Games, check out The Hunger Games first and then see Catching Fire. But yeah, a really, really good movie. Now, other news, Sony are cutting the budgets for their film production unit. Now, this is really sort of going back to something we discussed quite a few times on this podcast, which is the ridiculous amount of money that modern films are costing. And clearly Sony have realised this and have been forced to sort of cut back on their, on basically what is Sony Studios, after some fairly large budget cock-ups on their part, one of which is After Earth. Now, After Earth, actually, the review of the Blu-ray has just gone up on the site by Alan McDermott, and he was less than sort of kind about the film itself. Apparently, fantastic picture quality and sound quality on the disc. Bloody awful movie. But it's big budget bombs like that have basically forced Sony's hand, and now they've cut back the amount of money they're actually allocating to the film production unit by about, how much did they cut it back by? I think it's like 150 million, which, to be fair, isn't a massive difference because that's like one film budget. But I think they're also reducing the number of films that they're making in a year, which I think, again, goes back to something we've also talked about, which is that 2015 was looking like a summer when there were going to be way too many big budget films that, coming out at about the same time. That you just knew some of them were going to have to tank, and I noticed that a few films now have had their release schedules moved. So for example, Star Wars is now going to be opening in December and not in its usual summer month opening window. Again, I think partly because they needed more production time, but also why not move it out of that busy summer schedule?
It is going to be absolutely. I don't think that there's any avoiding the fact that there are too many very large blockbusters in production at the moment for them all to, well, even for actually the standard percentage of them to be a success, let alone all of them. All this is essentially, if you like, putting in a tiny airbag's worth of precaution whilst hurtling towards a solid object at 150 miles an hour. There's still going to be a bloodbath. going to start next summer, and it's going to work all the way through 2015 for a lot of stuff where it's just costing too much money to produce films which are of less than average. You know, they have a reasonable pull, but they're not they're not epoch making. They're not the everyone has to go and see this film moments, and yet they've got budgets larger than films that were like that, like Titanic, etc. So yeah, it's going to be pretty messy. I think this is a wise move. Whether it's too little too late, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'd echo those sentiments. It's a kind of it's almost like a gambling cycle where you're getting a lot of slightly similar spectacle films, and sooner or later there's the one that just absolutely tanks, and no one wants to be that studio, that one, you know, the straw that breaks the camel's back. But it seems inevitable that there's going to be a bit of a crash.
I mean, I'm surprised with After Earth, because that was a Will Smith movie, and Will Smith was one of those stars you can take the bank, yeah, he'll open at anything, but even that bombed. So
yeah, it was M. Night Shyamalan.
Yes, I think that was probably and it had his son in it.
I have to say, having what was the one where trees were killing people?
Oh, the Happening.
Yeah, ever since that, he's on my McCarthy-esque blacklist. I'm sorry, I'm not watching anything else he's producing ever after that. These trees are deadly. Brilliant.
Was it the trees in the end? I didn't even get that far in that.
I hate to break it to you, but yes, I'm afraid it was, and not Zooey Deschanel's Fringe.
Oh.
I will not have a word said against Zooey Deschanel. I love Zooey Deschanel. So
that's the one with Mark Wahlberg, isn't it?
Yes.
See, the only reason I know that is because the gif of Mark Wahlberg staring out in a confused manner just gets posted around the internet so often that's known more than the actual film itself.
But I mean, going back, dragging this tenuously back on subject. I mean, because I didn't get to watch it when it was in the cinemas, for various reasons, time constraints, other issues, didn't get to watch Pacific Rim in the cinema. I bought it on Blu-ray. I bought it as partly for sort of review purposes and so on and so forth. And I absolutely adored that. I mean, admittedly, I have a very soft spot for giant robots. Always have done. But I mean, in terms of success terms, that made what looks like a busload of money, but even then it only counts as, once you actually start looking at distribution and all the other bits and bobs, it only counts as a just about break even, and that's something is catastrophically wrong. And there's going to be, and when you've got a relatively good film, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not for a second pretending that Pacific Rim is Oscar-winning material, although the soundtrack is awesome. But when you've got something which is actually quite a tight, cohesive, good popcorn film, just about recovering its money, when you look at what's coming up over the next couple of years, oof, that's going to be painful.
Well, I think I mentioned this statistic before, but it's terrifying, to be honest. In order to break even, I mean, as it happens, it made a ton of money. In the end, it made like 1.6 billion worldwide. But in order to break even, the Avengers had to make over 800 million. It had to make $1 billion just to like go in a profit, basically. That's just, I mean, absolutely terrifying, isn't it? When you consider that that's how much money is being involved. Because, like you say, Ed, it's not just the production cost of the film; there's also all the marketing costs to go with it. Then they have to give some of that money to the studio, to the cinema chain. So ultimately, you know, if a film costs 200 million, it needs to make 400 to 500 million just to break even. And I think you know, some of them are costing 250 to 300 million, which means by that rule they've got to make 600-700 million, which makes, you know, one of the most successful films of all time just to break even. Now that kind of economics is not sustainable.
Yeah, and we've got a number of things where that's, you know, it's like they're having to bank on that. I mean, and obviously the Lone Ranger is if you like, that might be the first of these. I mean, admittedly, that had disaster written on it from the very beginning.
What about John Carter?
Disney have been unlucky because the last 2 years they've had the two big bombs.
The thing is, though, that actually John Carter is a weird one, because it's more a case that it's a bit incomprehensible. It's not actually a bad film.
I like it. I thought it was a good movie, but unfortunately,
and also word of mouth sank that, whereas the Lone Ranger deservedly sank. It's just awful.
You don't spend $250 million on a bloody comedy western. You just don't, unless you want to lose $250 million, which they did.
But well, yes. So
there you go. Yeah.
See, I thought a few years ago that the big model was going to be following stuff like Lord of the Rings, which was tying in productions. So no longer just looking at solitary films and then making sequels, you know, in the superhero mold, but in fact trying to roll them all into one and then, you know, amalgamate those costs in some manner. But it just seems perhaps that's too great a gamble. To do that, now.
Mark, though, you'd need there's two problems with that. One is, in order to do that, you'd have to have multiple scripts written in order to shoot. So with the Lord of the Rings, for example, obviously you already had 3 books on which to base your screenplays. That made more sense to shoot them as one. But it is a massive gamble, because what would have happened if Fellowship of the Ring had bombed? You know, New Line would have been stuck with 2 more films in the bag, you know, and no one wants to see them, and they've already spent all this money. So it is a big risk to shoot back-to-back films for staggered release. But there are obviously economies of scale that come with doing that. You're absolutely right. But
you think someone could do that rather than spending $250 million, though? Surely,
James Cameron.
Well, you know, you think that they're shooting The Hobbit back to back, like 3 movies, but so far I believe he spent $550 million and counting. So it ain't cheap that way either, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, but to be fair, that's because he's got a blank checkbook, hasn't he?
Well, Cameron's worse. He's doing 3 Avatar movies and he's spending $1 billion. Let me just say that again, if everyone didn't hear that. $1 billion. I mean, that's just.
Will that be the one that breaks it?
Put that into perspective. India is sending a probe to the moon for less than $100 million.
You could go
to Mars. Sorry, yeah, they're going to Mars.
45 million, wasn't it?
75, Mars. I thought, was all up in terms of not just the launch cost, in terms of actually telling and getting data back once it's there, but 75 million. So 1/10 of an Avatar movie.
I forgot to mention, by the way, that with the Hunger Games Catching Fire, Kaz Harlow's review has just gone up on the site as well. So please give that a read. He's as enthused about it as I was. But yeah, it's a really good rundown of the movie. No spoilers, just but a nice little review of the film itself. Right, finally, finishing off, Doctor Who was not the only 50th anniversary this weekend, because on Friday it was the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And now, I'm a bit of a conspiracy nut. I've been really into the Kennedy assassination for a long time, at least 25 years. And there's been quite a few movies that have covered the assassination one way or the other. I'm thinking here about Executive Action, which was made in the 70s and was the first film I saw which suggested the idea of a conspiracy. Obviously, there was Oliver Stone's JFK, which is kind of like, you know, the Citizen Kane of conspiracy films. There was a smaller film made at the same time as JFK called Ruby, which kind of looked at Jack Ruby's character and starred Sheridan Fenn as a go-go dancer and Danny Aiello as Jack Ruby. Then more recently, one was shown on Saturday night, last night, on Channel 4 called Killing Kennedy. And there's also Parkland, which has just opened at the cinema. And it's interesting that if you look at the older films, like Executive Action and JFK specifically, they're very much the conspiracy theorist movies, talking about, you know, a big conspiracy to kill Kennedy, and, you know, Oswald not necessarily being involved, or if he was involved in part of the conspiracy. But it seems like things have gone full circle now, and now it's gone back to basically Oswald did it. And, you know, having studied the assassination quite a bit over the years, I've even been to Dealey Plaza. I too have come to the conclusion ultimately that Oswald did it. I mean, it's the only explanation for all the forensic evidence there is. And unfortunately, when you watch something like JFK, much as I love JFK, I think it's an absolute masterwork of a manipulation on the part of Oliver Stone in terms of mixing real footage with fake footage and misinformation and some facts.
Didn't he basically say that it was his response to like the Warren Commission?
Yeah,
it was almost like his own propaganda.
Yeah, exactly what he did say, and it is very much a conspiracy propaganda. But unfortunately, now I know so much about the assassination and the real facts, and I know how much of that film is total fabrication, just totally made up. Not a shred of evidence whatsoever to support a lot of the accusations that Stone makes. I mean, even the magic bullet theory, which, you know, in the film, famously in JFK, where he goes to the left, you know, and talks about the bullets moving left and right and zigzagging, didn't happen because of the way they were sat in the cars. In fact, if you think about it logically, once the bullet went through Kennedy, it could only go into Governor Connolly. There was nowhere else for it to go. And the more you think about it, the more you think, well, actually, and I know you pointed this out, Mark. There's a slightly bad taste, I think, game called JFK Reloaded, where you could basically shoot him from the book depository over and over again. And I did play that for a healthily long time. I got quite good at killing Kennedy, actually. I must admit, I was getting a lot of headshots in that game.
I'd just like to say a good evening to our friends at GCHQ. I'd like to make it very clear that I've never played this game, so you can go after my colleagues and have a quick chat with them. I'm good, thanks.
I'd love to see what your recommended products are tonight, Steve.
Yeah. Manuka Kano rifle, telescopic sight, rifle, pistol, copy of Militant Worker. Right, guys. So, are you conspiracy or lone nut theorists?
Let's be very clear about this. I don't want there to be any doubt about this at all. Conspiracy theorists are just it's a desperate desire to believe that there is order in a world which is unfair and entirely random.
But that's what they want you to believe.
I won't mock you for it, but I won't humor you. I'm sorry, it's as simple as that. When you look at the availability of data and the increasing impossibility of keeping things secret. I mean, JFK actually isn't the one that winds me up. The 9/11 conspiracy theorists can get bent. I've got to be very clear about this. When we look at the fragility of secrecy in the 21st century, the idea of keeping any organized conspiracy a secret for any length of time is so bewilderingly impossible that you are asked, it boils down to Occam's razor. The simplest outcome is by and large the most likely. There are no exceptions to this rule. Sorry. I enjoy reading them. I enjoy visiting conspiracy theory forums, and there was a wonderful thread that ran to back when we were actually chopping threads at their 1,000 post limits. It's archived. If you've got a spare afternoon, the conspiracy theory thread that ran in our very own general chat forum was about as much fun as I've had with my clothes on for some time, just because it brings out people from the woodwork. And it gets to the stage where you're sort of playing conspiracy theory bingo for all of the phrases to go through. And I was down everything except international Zionism. And I said, I'm down everything except international Zionism. And I got, rebuked. Oh, we're not all like that, so on and so forth. And literally 4 pages later, someone just weighs in and goes, you do know that everything is controlled by the Zionists. And it's like, yes, I've got a full house.
My favorite conspiracy theory is the one about Titanic wasn't the ship that sank. It was the Olympic.
The thing is, though, that that's an easier one. That's actually easier to get your head round than almost anything else. I mean, it's certainly easy in many bizarre and bewildering ways, easier to do than Diana 9/11.
Just for those who were wondering what happened in this conspiracy theory, the Olympic was damaged in an accident. Which is true. But the conspiracy theory is that they then refitted the Olympic to be the Titanic and refitted the Titanic to be the Olympic and then deliberately scuttled the Olympic in order to claim the insurance money back. But obviously cocked it up and killed all those people at the same time. No, it's just...
It's still bollocks, but in many ways it's more well-crafted bollocks.
The thing is that when you have actually
time for it,
when genuine conspiracies have actually been uncovered, i.e., say, for example, going back to the beginning of this podcast with LG Gate, but with Watergate, I mean, that was a genuine conspiracy. But the fact is that everyone involved in it was utterly incompetent and couldn't keep a secret. And that's actually the way reality is. No one, I mean, the people that think we didn't go to the moon. Are you actually trying to tell me that many people could keep a secret that big and that the Russians wouldn't have let on about the fact that they, I mean, it's just like, get real. Where did you think those massive rockets were going then?
Well, it goes back to that Mitchell and Webb sketch. We still need to build the massive rocket. Well, we were kind of hoping that we were going to make the saving on that. It's like after that, it's just catering costs.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Mark, what about you? Are you into conspiracy theory?
Not greatly, but I have to say there have been a bunch of the kind of JFK documentaries on recently, and the theory that in fact the third shot might have come from one of the kind of Secret Serviceman's rifle accidentally. I actually thought that wasn't too bad.
That would happen if I was playing him in a game. That would definitely be the case.
Yeah,
but
it would kind of explain why, should we say, the brain went missing, and why there would be kind of what seemed like a half-assed cover-up with evidence going missing, but at the same time, every other rational piece of evidence points towards the fact that he was clearly shot by Lee Harvey Oswald.
I think it's more present that actually he was in Texas and every other person is armed. As you say, yes, it's possible it came from a Secret Service rifle. It's possible it just came from someone randomly discharging their firearm.
I'll tell you my theory is that when Kennedy was assassinated, they launched the Warren Commission to investigate his assassination. Yes. Now the Commissioner Warren investigated Jack the Ripper. In my opinion, the man on the grassy knoll was actually a very, very old Jack the Ripper. It was his last killing. He did Kennedy and then he disappeared off. That's the way it happened.
Oh, time travel.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be time travel. It could be because of 1888 to 1963. What's that? That's about 70. So he could have been about 90.
How?
It could have happened. It could have happened. Right, and on that note...
And on that bombshell.
Right, that's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Mark Botwright.
So, now it ends.
And Ed Selley.
You can't drown, you fool, you're immortal.
You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark AVForums.com for the latest reviews, news and videos. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show? Please, God, we hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Steve Withers. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next Wednesday.